So today I'm going to talk about anxiety, share with you some of my personal experiences and talk about how I've started to use it as a positive rather than a negative and how you can do the same. So stick around for this whole video because we're going to cover what anxiety is, why we have it, what it does to us, and then finally how we can start to use it properly. So like everything that we experience as human beings, anxiety is something that we've evolved over time. You know, it's there to help us survive. It's not supposed to be this negative force that's going to control our lives. So to put it simply, anxiety is just uncertainty about the future in relation to something that we care about, okay? So you don't get anxious about things that have happened in the past. You might get anxious about how something that's happened in the past will affect the future, let's say. That can happen, like if you've had a negative interaction with someone last week and then you're going to go see them again. You can be anxious about that. Yeah, but we don't get anxious about things that we don't care about. So it's also different to fear. It's not the same thing as fear, despite that it can feel very similar. So let's say there's a lion running towards you, right? You're going to be feeling fear in that moment. Now anxiety is sort of more being worried about the lion that you haven't spotted yet. You know, you can't see the lion, but you're thinking, what if there's a lion, okay? So it's very unlikely that you'll get anxiety about a squirrel being near you because, you know, what's a squirrel going to do at the end of the day? So anxiety is supposed to be used as a warning to us. A warning that we can't ignore, which is why it's such an overwhelming feeling. It's because it's forcing us to pay attention to it. So why do we actually experience anxiety? Why is it something that we've developed? So because we can think into the future as humans, which, you know, it's thought most animals can't do that, and it's, you know, we're a rare case in that. So anxiety fundamentally is warning us about the future. So if we think back to back when we lived in tribes, that sort of thing, it was a lot easier for us to become injured or die. You know, you get a cut, it gets infected, you're done. You break your leg, that's it, you know. It's so much easier to die back then. So picture this. You've got two tribes. The first tribe has evolved the trait anxiety. So this first tribe, they start to become anxious about all the lions that could be around them, right? So they build some walls around the little village, or, you know, whatever. And the second tribe that doesn't have anxiety, within a few months, they've all been eaten by lions. Right? So, you know, it's there for a tool. It's there to try to move us towards action. You know, to solve a problem before it can happen. So what does it actually do to you physically, right? So when we feel anxious, a few things start to happen in the body. The brain is going to release hormones such as adrenaline and dopamine. Dopamine's part of the reward system. You know, when you tick the box after a task, you complete something you've been working towards, you get that feel-good energy. That's dopamine, right? So anxiety is going to give us an increased heart rate. It's going to activate the fight or flight response in the nervous system, and you're going to start breathing quicker, you know, more shallow breaths, and that's just going to fill the body with oxygen. You know, it's going to be heart's pumping, lungs are going, it's getting more oxygen around the body to prepare you for action. Okay, so while the modern world, you know, today's world, is a lot safer than when we might have been living in tribes or when we were more sort of in nature, our brain kind of hasn't realised this yet. So, for example, if you were sleeping outside and you've got a campfire there and a dog, then your body and your brain is going to be like, oh good, there's a fire there, it's going to keep me warm, the dog's going to warn me of any danger, you know, I can afford to go into a nice deep sleep and get a good night's rest. Whereas if you're sleeping without a fire, without a dog, then you need to be more alert because there's nothing around you to alert you to any sort of incoming danger. So you can't afford to go into that much of a deep sleep, for example, right? And that's very much the case with, like, say, your bedroom today. Okay, So the modern world is also a lot more complex. Well, it's a lot safer, there's a lot more to be uncertain about, which is fundamentally what anxiety is. You know, whether that be, say, your job security, grades at school, social expectations, just social interactions, right? And with our constant overstimulation of our brains, you know, with things like phones and social media and, you know, whatever it might be, there's just so much more around us to be uncertain about, you know, that could potentially trigger an anxious response. So one of the worst things that you can do, and this will naturally happen, is starting to have anxiety about having anxiety itself, right? Because this creates a positive feedback loop. So imagine you've got a microphone, putting it in front of a speaker, you know, that noise is just going to get louder and louder, speaker's going to blow up, okay? So this is basically the same thing that happens with anxiety. Let's say you have social anxiety, which is something I've experienced myself. So you get to a point where at the start, maybe you were just having a conversation with someone, and then you start to feel anxious. Now, before you even speak to that person or leave the house or whatever it might be, you start to become anxious because you're expecting yourself to feel anxious, if that makes sense. So you start having anxiety about anxiety, and this can sort of cripple you. It can ruin your life, essentially. You know, I've had this where I didn't go out with friends, or I wouldn't even answer text messages, things like that, just because I was anxious about being anxious, and I couldn't even approach the problems, right? Because of this like positive feedback loop. So how can we change the way we look at anxiety so that it actually helps us rather than hindering us? So there was a study done. There was two groups of people, right? Both of these groups, all these people, they all have social anxiety, and they were given a task, which was to prepare a speech on a controversial topic and give that speech to a room of people. And they only had a few minutes to sort of prepare this speech, right? So essentially just torturing them, right? So with the first group, the researchers, the scientists, whatever, they took them aside and they said, so the butterflies, the increased heart rate, all the physical symptoms that's going on in your body right now, this is the body preparing you for peak performance, right? It's preparing you for action. You know, like I said, you're breathing faster, you're getting more oxygen into the body, the heart's pumping harder, you're getting more oxygen into the brain and the muscles so that you can be more responsive. And now, after they were told that, and they backed it up with all the data and things, they went on stage, gave the speech. And within that group, they found that their heart rate and blood pressure both went down while they were giving the speech. They were a lot more confident, they stuttered less, and they had more sort of open body language. Whereas the group that wasn't given this talk before they went and gave the speech, they didn't do so well, as you might imagine. So essentially, we need to sort of reframe the way that we think about anxiety so that we can use it as a tool for action and creative thinking. And the way you frame it is really going to hugely affect how you respond to being anxious. So, say for example, you talk to an Olympic athlete before they're about to do their run, or whatever it might be, and someone from that test, right? So they're both going to tell you that they've got the increased heart rate, you know, they've got the butterflies, all this kind of thing. But the difference is the Olympic athlete is going to say, "Oh, I'm feeling excited about this," right? Person with social anxiety is going to say, "Oh, I'm really nervous." And so that right there is sort of the fundamental difference. You know, stop looking at it in a negative light and try to look at it in a positive way. So essentially just say to yourself, I'm not nervous, I'm not anxious, I'm excited. You know, my body's getting ready, it's getting me amped up, ready to go. You know, preparing me for peak performance. Okay, so when you next encounter anxiety, there's a few things that you can do. So first thing, recognize that you're starting to feel anxious about something. Okay, so once you've done that, you need to kind of try and figure out what the cause is. What is this thing that is important that might go wrong? Okay, so just think of a few things. Was it the argument you had the other week? Did you leave the oven on? Did you lock the door? Whatever it is. And then once you've kind of figured out what the cause could be, I'd say then, try and get out of the situation, calm down a bit. Maybe go for a walk, do some meditation, get a quick workout in, have a cold shower, those sort of things. Personally, for this, I find anything that sort of takes me out of my mind and more into the body, so physical exercise and just physical experience more, that sort of thing. Cold showers are great for this, because when you're in a cold shower, you're sort of in a survival mode. It's like there's no room for anything other than just focusing on breathing and trying to, just you're cold in the shower. It's not a pleasant experience, okay? But there's no room for any thoughts. There's no room for the anxiety to come through or any depression, whatever it is, right? So yeah, those are the things that work best for me. There's more physical things. So after you get to a point where your anxiety's, it's gone down and you've got it under control again, and you figured out, well, to the best of your ability, what the cause might be. The next step is to kind of come up with a plan, right? Come up with a solution to this potential issue, right? And then you need to sort of work towards it. I don't think it matters too much if you actually solve the problem, because the anxiety is trying to get you to act. It's trying to get you to do something so that you don't have problems within the future. So make your plan, and then you have to do it. You have to start working towards it. If you make the plan and you don't take action, it's probably not going to work very well. But yeah, those are my thoughts on how we can start using anxiety positively rather than negatively.